We left off at what the job market values. Well, I feel like this topic needs some elaboration, because I told a lot about how men and women do different work, but this different work doesn't necessarily mean what one would instinctively think when talking about more valuable work. Here, valuable work should be understood strictly from a cold labor market perspective, and this will also answer your question about why there are so many more male CEOs. Ready? Ready. So, the job market values some very strange things and rewards them with more money, all of which are linked to some kind of human trait or behavior. No matter what profession you work in, these same strange human aspects will be rewarded based on where your decisions and behavior fall on the following scale, or what value they take on. The more you adopt a sociopathic approach in these aspects, the better you can assert your will, which means you climb higher and faster, but this comes at a steep price, your soul. On the other hand, if you go in the opposite direction and do everything conscientiously, that's great, and it works for a while, but after a certain point, it can easily turn into a situation where your indecisiveness renders you practically incapable of asserting your interests, and you fall drastically behind. People look down on you, they don't trust you. Not only will you be unable to negotiate a higher salary or position for yourself, but they won't even listen to you on the smallest of tasks, because you bury yourself in front of everyone with your excessive lack of confidence. Let me give you an example. Lying. Obviously, lying is not a nice thing to do. However, a minimal amount of lying is a prerequisite for normal human functioning. Let's say you started working as a waiter at a completely new place that day, and you barely even know the system, let alone what's on the menu, and then a customer asks you which dish you recommend. Now, at this point, you could stand there awkwardly, mumbling that you don't know, you just started today, you're not familiar with the menu, etc. The whole thing would turn into a total disaster. Embarrassing, not just for you, but for your colleagues and the restaurant, and it would make the guests distrust you. Or you could just confidently say that the lava stone grilled venison loin with porcini risotto is great, and that's it. Problem solved, everyone's happy. In the end, they will either like it or they won't, who cares? But then there is the other extreme, the people at the top of society, who basically don't say a single honest word, and will shamelessly lie about anything if it means more money or a higher position for them.
Number one rule of Wall Street. Nobody, I don't care if you're Warren Buffett or if you're Jimmy Buffett, nobody knows if the stock is gonna go up, down, sideways, or in fucking circles. Least of all stockbrokers, right?
They pave their way up with lies. It's no coincidence that the highest paying jobs are pretty much politician, lawyer, broker. And tell me, what do you think? Which gender is generally more modest, inhibited, and overthinking? Or take impudence, for example. This is most evident in salary negotiations. The person who confidently states a high salary expectation in a job interview will also be perceived by the employer as someone who will represent the company's interests just as well as their own. So having high salary demands is not only not a disadvantage, but often an advantage in the job market. And honestly, I don't see anything wrong with that. If I were a boss, I would probably think the same way. And, of course, this can also be taken too far and abused.
We've already offered you a position.
Nobody in this town works without a retainer, guys. You think you can find somebody who does? We tell you have my blessing. But I think we all know that person's not going to represent you as well as I can.
Will, our offer is $84,000 a year plus benefits.
Retainer!
I don't think I can. Larry?
I've got $73.
Now tell me, which gender is more compromising, more content with less, more conflict avoidant? Which gender is the one that will dare to ask for less? Or take pushiness. For example, my boss is the type who won't hire new people even if everyone in the office is begging for more workers to handle the workload, and yet one day he suddenly announces that we are getting a new colleague. And we are all like, what happened? And he tells us that an intern applied, and unlike the others, this one actually called him directly to ask when they could come in for the interview. And my boss said this assertiveness was so impressive to him that he hired them, even though he wasn't even considering taking on someone new. But then, again, there is the other extreme, those ruthless sociopaths who trample over everything and everyone to get ahead.
Semmi más nem kell, csak maximum pofa, no lelkiismeret. ahogy egyik menedzser barátom szokta mondani a másiknak. Nyomjad, 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 nyomjad. Könyököz, mész előre.
By the way, the person who applied to our company was actually a very young intern girl. So yes, women can be like this too, but let's be honest here. Which gender is generally more likely to behave this way? And which one is the much more human, normal, conscience-driven gender? The one that, at the highest level, simply cannot step over others in this way, no matter how much of an advantage it would bring. Then there is loyalty. It's crazy, but people who switch jobs regularly see their salaries grow at almost twice the rate compared to those who stay loyal to one company. And sure, having more workplaces means broader experience, a bigger network, and so on, but that's not what the job market rewards here. It rewards the tough decision and the guilt that comes with changing jobs. Here, too, the goal is to find a healthy balance. Don't be a job hopper, that's what they call these people, but also don't spend your entire life at the same company. Get to know different working methods, people, etc. Now, which gender is the more insecure, anxious, and less willing to take risks? The one that finds it harder to switch jobs? Or take honesty. Obviously, don't fake working 16 hours from home when you were actually on vacation the whole time, but at least have enough self-interest to count other work-related activities, like meetings, calls, shitting, or other office tasks as part of your working hours, instead of stressing over whether it technically counts as work or not. And which gender do you think is the more fearful, uncertain, and overly conscientious one? The same goes for communication. Of course, don't dominate others, don't yell at them, treat them with respect, listen to them, etc. But also don't use phrases like, I don't know, I'm too dumb for this, I don't understand this. Don't cover your mouth with your hand, look people in the eye, shake hands firmly, be decisive, don't use conditional language, speak loudly, etc, etc. Now, which gender is more likely to speak in a soft, hesitant, and reversed manner? Or take boldness. I once had a female colleague who had the chance to take on an insanely good multi-apartment, multi-billion project, which would have taught her so much, helped her grow in planning and organization, and she could have handled it just like her other projects, but no. She said she didn't dare to take it on because she felt she wasn't knowledgeable enough, even though she would have gotten help and everything, but she simply didn't have the confidence. See, the market does not value this the same way. Of course, the other extreme isn't good either. Don't stuff your CV with things you don't actually know how to do, and don't act like a boss in areas where you have no clue. And this ties into risk-taking as well. So you can make countless memes and videos about how the boss does nothing while making the most money. But come on, they are the one taking the risk, and the job market values that differently. And hey, nobody said you can't start your own business either. Of course, don't abuse this either, don't take unnecessary risks, and don't play with people's livelihoods just for higher profits. Now, which gender do you think is the one that takes fewer risks, plays it safe, and overthinks everything? And I could list so many more examples of manipulation, blackmail, forcefulness, interrupting others, giving criticism, comments, legal wrangling, tax payment, being shady, exploitation. The entire world of work, no matter what profession you're in, is about how well you can maintain this delicate balance, where you're not a complete jerk who crushes everyone, but also not an utterly spineless person incapable of asserting yourself. And in my experience, with female colleagues, it's extremely rare to find one who even reaches the decisive level on this scale, even though there is nothing wrong with that at all. It's just normal human behavior. We like decisiveness, clear stances, and straightforward, unambiguous situations, even if that sometimes means one party has to exert a bit more dominance over the other. But if someone lacks this skill or willingness, then, unsurprisingly, the market doesn't value them the same way. And let's not even get into my other observations. How well women handle stress, whether they can say no, whether they can prioritize tasks, establish importance, let things go, develop their own workflow for maximum efficiency, or even just negotiate assertively but casually. So the glass ceiling phenomenon doesn't exist, let's drop that nonsense already.
Okay, we're going straight to the top, where all the executives hang out. What's happening? It's the glass ceiling Mom was talking about. What's that? The invisible barrier that stops anyone who's not an old rich dude from getting the best job.
And let's finally put an end to these completely unnecessary word explanations that feminists made up just to back up their artificially created false ideologies. So you're asking why there are more men among the CEOs of the top 500 American companies? Me? Well, because the leadership level of the top 500 American companies is already this fully sociopathic environment where crushing others is practically part of the job description, and women generally aren't as good at that. But honestly, is that a bad thing? Is it bad that someone isn't like that? Do we need women to become just as oppressive, ruthless, and immoral shitfaces as men? Isn't it actually wonderful that someone can still function normally in this corrupt world? And besides, I don't understand why there should be more female CEOs. Why would this be a good thing? How would the world be better if we distorted, stressed out, and emotionally wrecked a ton of women, and thus a ton of mothers, just so we can satisfy our OCD and balance out some ratio that someone once said it's only good when it's balanced? And I'm sorry, but no matter how many women we push into executive positions, no matter how many quotas we set, no matter how many articles we write about the non-existent patriarchal oppressive male society, or how much we distort women's deepest feelings about what they should be like or what we value in them, most men will still feel more comfortable in this soulless sociopathic cutthroat struggle. At least until the moment I suddenly find myself on the bus, realizing that instead of talking about cookie recipes and their family members, the two women sitting behind me are discussing football, cars, shooting games, political ideologies, economic theories, history, fantasy, model building, and I don't know, some kind of collection. Because the people who are interested in those things, meaning men, let's stop beating around the bush already, seriously. Thank you. So men are interested in these things, and as long as they naturally gravitate towards competitive, combative, word-changing, technical, collecting, and creative activities called calculated, rational things, they will continue to perform better in areas of life that rewards these traits. See the job market. And the goal isn't to change that. At least I certainly don't think so. Women are good at other things, and morally speaking, they are better at much more important things. There are significantly more women than men in professions such as nursing, teaching, social work, volunteering, interior design, and psychology, because women generally feel more at home in areas where they can help others, care for people, do something good for others, make the world, or at least their immediate environment, a better place, and that's amazing. And this manifests even in the smallest everyday interactions, like the natural kindness they show toward...
Szia, mondjad.
Hát én mondom. Valaki ráírna a hölgyre, hogy adásban van? Remélem megtörtént.
Anyway, so women are kinder and men are good at other things. So couldn't it just be that we men and the women who actually feel at home in this dirty careerist work world, we fight for the big money, which then women and the men who don't feel at home in this world either, but are much more empathetic, caring beings, they spend and use it for good purposes, like raising children, caring for others, social services, etc. And everyone would be happy, and we wouldn't have to deal with this constant whining about salaries and how many % of executives are which gender. But why is this whining happening? Why is this such a big topic? And that's what this entire video series was leading up to. So why is it that we only ever hear about the wage gap and not any other kind of gap? Or why is it that every feminist article is about salaries, positions, and ranks?
That, detective, is the right question.
And even their arguments are about how much more GDP we would generate if women earned more. Well, because we live in a world that only rewards this. Yes. Only income and GDP matter today, and that's the key that finally answers why this particular slice of the working world is so exaggerated and historically over-discussed, why no one talks about, for example, how valuable someone's work is to society or how good a person they are. The question isn't why do women earn less money than men, the real question is why is the question why do women earn less money than men even the question? Why is this the only metric that matters? And well, that's because in this world the only thing of value is salary and the position that comes with it, which essentially means how many people you rule over, how much of a god you are. And unfortunately, this mindset does not favor those who work in more people-focused, socially sensitive, helping professions, because they themselves are more empathetic and more affected by the suffering of others. But the fact that our world is like this, that's a bad thing. A very, very bad thing. And I truly feel sorry for women because we don't value what they are good at nearly enough, and what is, in fact, a much more morally admirable way of being. Neither in terms of salary, nor in terms of recognition. And as much as I'm sick of every feminist article and argument, deep down, I feel like this frustration is behind all of them. With completely ridiculous arguments and word explanations, they are actually trying to convince us that both genders are equally soulless, but they're not. And it's great that they're not. And we don't need to distort human nature just because the job market rewards male behavior more. So if I have one message for women, okay, we scared them off in the first part, but guys, make sure to pass this on them. So, my message to women is, do whatever truly moves you in your heart. And if that's a job with lower pay or lower rank, that's totally fine. In fact, you will have my utmost respect because you value that mission, that principle, that dedication you fight for more than your own gain. There is no need to balance out numbers, and not everyone needs to be the same. But most importantly, we don't need to turn men and women against each other. The world is beautiful as it is, because we complement each other, and together we create a world that both functions and is actually good to live in. You know, if more people expressed it this way, instead of just saying women are dumber, then we wouldn't feel so shitty. That's why I made this series. Alright, I'm off to give birth. And I thank you all for watching these 3 videos. There will be a closing episode to this series, which will pick up from here, but focus on something slightly different. Until then! There will be a closing episode to this series, which will pick up from here. Fuck it.